very, very difficult to obtain, and this has had very strange effects. People have had to, various penal authorities have had to scramble to replace the drug, which is apparently irreplaceable. And but the image here is the penitentiary in Oklahoma. So I actually just pulled this off of the New York Times on Sunday. I was reading the Times, Saturday, I guess. I've been collecting stories of botched executions in the United States. There's actually a book out if anybody's interested in botched. If you're looking for research topics, this is a good one. It's really interesting. There's a new book out, came out last year by Austin Surratt called Botched Executions, which is a history of the death penalty in the United States told through the story of the executions that were botched. But in April of 2014, Clayton D. Lockett was executed in Oklahoma, and the drug that they used wasn't good enough, and it took him almost a minute to die moaning and writhing in pain. So this has led Oklahoma to temporarily suspend their executions. In some states, what the lack of this drug has meant is that people are lining up in death row. In other states, it means that the states are making use of all of these other cocktails, but they're refusing to say what's in their cocktails. Very interesting. There's actually a really interesting research project, I think, to be found in looking at the protection of states in saying what is in their death cocktails, and the protection of saying what's in the pepper spray that they use for demonstrators, because that's also protected. If you're looking for grim topics, I think these are also really, really interesting. So what's interesting about this case is actually the Supreme Court has now said it's time that we're going to look again at the means of execution in the United States. So the 8th Amendment is going to come into play once again in the Supreme Court. So these debates are important. So for instance, it's often understood that the US Supreme Court's 1972 decision, which gave rise to the 1973 moratorium on the death penalty, it overturned all existing US capital punishment kind of systems, was predicated on the fact that the means of execution was understood to be cruel and unusual. Now this is actually, of course, dead wrong. What, in fact, was true is that it's not that the method of execution was unusually cruel. The Supreme Court held that the incidence of execution was cruelly unusual, in the sense that there were a great number of murders and a small number of people who were the murderers who were then subjected to capital punishment. And so in the words of Chief Justice Stewart, it was cruel and unusual in the same way that being struck by lightning